it's been kind of like, a crazy, I guess it's just sort of blown up, and you've on the cover of Wired and all this kind of stuff. Like, how's that, what's that been like? Do you think it's been,
Yeah, it's, I think the big thing is to not get distracted by a lot of it. And I think I'm actually, it's easier because we went through some of the heydays of dodgeball. We got a lot of attention for the dodgeball acquisition. And, I think some of that of just not caring so much about the press and just being really passionate about trying to build something, it helps keep you focused, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important to have at the company. It's a lot of people are talking about all the great stuff that we're doing, but I think the company as a whole, we have to kind of stay humble, and we have to realize there's, we're up against bigger players. There's still a lot of work to do. We have a lot of improvements we need to make. So just keeping focused is a.
Do you think that a bunch of companies I've seen now are sort of taking this strategy of they're getting good user growth and things, but they're deliberately kind of staying quiet about it to avoid, they're kind of taking the sort of under the radar approach, so that Facebook doesn't add their features to their site or whatever.
I can see that too.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of seems like there's advantages to either approach, I guess, but.
Yeah, I think we just by default, we used to make a lot of noise about it in the beginning, and I think now just a lot of noise is generated about everything that's going on with Foursquare, which is good because it raises the awareness, but it's also a signal to everyone else, hey, Foursquare's getting a lot of attention. What are they doing that's so right?
And so you've been working on this for basically the same idea for now, I guess.
Yeah, it's 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So it's your life mission or something. So what's your, I guess first you had rumored at least the option to sell the company and decided not to. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is that partly because it's sort of your life mission and
I think one of the, one thing that was frustrating about the dodgeball experience was not getting able to do all the stuff that we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And, that's not just dodgeball at Google. It's dodgeball back in 2000 and then 2001 and, moving into ITP and after ITP. And we've got this very specific vision of the things that we want to build. And, I feel like now is our best shot to push that stuff out there. Because it's a real pain to go from 0 users to, even a couple thousand users, never mind to 100,000 or 6 million. But once you've got that audience and once you do all the hard work to build it, you can just kind of invent the future and push it out to these people. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that gets really, really fun. And that's the thing that's really,
I mean, you could have, obviously you would have been wildly rich or something, probably if you sold it. So, I mean, clearly that's not your motivation. Your motivation.
Yeah, I think it's just to get the ideas out of our heads and get them in the hands of people. Because it's not just satisfying for us to build it, but it's satisfying to get to be some of the first people that get to do this.
Yeah.
And I think along the way we're hearing these stories about how we're inspiring other startups and inspiring other entrepreneurs to start companies or even just to start companies in New York or to do your own thing, and that's an added benefit too. So I mean, it all kind of adds up and it's pretty fun.
And what's your the tagline is unlock your city. So what's in 5 years, can you describe kind of fantasy use cases
The fantasy use cases, they're not that different than they were in 2000 or 2001. And you would imagine, what are all the cool things that devices can do? And, for a long time, all we wanted to do was get GPS on the phones. And now, we have that, and the maps on the phone and stuff. But I think the stuff that we're chasing now, it's is there, can you build applications that kind of take a survey of all the people in the room? All right, there's 100 people in this, in this room or in this bar or at this airport lounge. Who are the ones I'm supposed to meet? Who are the friends of my brother that I can go interact with? Right, and more specifically for Foursquare, it's if you think of the phone as just a bunch of it's just sensors that are stuck in this device that's connected to the network. How can I walk around the city and have the phone come alive and remind me of oh, this is the place you should go to for lunch, or this is the place that you read an article about 6 months ago that you've since forgotten about, but now we want to remind you so you have an opportunity to experience that. Mm-hmm. How can my experience of Chicago or Barcelona or even the West Village be different based upon everything in the social graph and all the things that I've done with Foursquare?
Mm-hmm. I thought one of the coolest features you guys did, which I don't think got a lot of attention, was the button on the New York Times where you can add it to your tips, which I think is really interesting because it's a way. Well, a couple of things are interesting. It's a way to really kind of connect. You're sitting in front of the computer, but then it connects to a real world experience later on, right?
Yeah. So if you look at what Instapaper does, where they have like the read it later. It's basically do it later.
Yeah,
and so we've got this idea that like anything that you see online that is tied to a location, it could be like a piece of art that's in an art gallery, or it could be a picture of a burger that you want to try. You should be able to just click on that and add it to your Foursquare. And then as you're walking around the world, like Foursquare just buzzes you and it's like, oh, that burger that you saw, like it's in this place, and oh, that piece of artwork that you're interested in, it's around the corner.
It's also really interesting from a business point of view because like so much of like the New York is like you may have read about the thing in the New York Times. They don't get business. They don't get paid for that basically. Because there's no way. Like one of the big problems right now in sort of the online advertising world is that there's no proper way to kind of attribute things back to their original sort of intent generation. Right. And so the only people that really get paid, like that's why like coupon sites get disproportionate payment because you can attribute it to right. So I think it's also like, to me, like that feature is particularly interesting because it I mean, we're in a situation where like, the New York people are saying the New York Times might not, the media might go out of business or something, and like part of it, I think the problem is they're not getting paid properly for their contribution to sort of generating purchasing intent, let's say. And you guys are, I think, providing a way to do that. I think it's actually, I mean, I don't know, I think it's sort of profound. But
there's a lot of like interesting ways you can chop this stuff up. Like if the New York Times come out with a list of the 50 best sandwiches, and you can, transfer that into Foursquare and carry that around with you, and it's driving me to go to those places. Like you think like, hey, the New York Times should get some credit for bringing me to this local merchant. And, I think those have been kind of pie in the sky ideas for a long time. Like how does a content provider get credit for driving, driving traction to that? And I think with some of the stuff that we're doing, we're closing those gaps. Like we're figuring out some of the data streams and some of the data pieces and some of the accountability that, hopefully will make that stuff possible in the future.
Yeah, interesting.